Hello again, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Noble Father podcast. If you're listening to this on the audio waves, we are now uploading, we've uploaded these into our YouTube channel. You can go check that out. If you look up Noble Father on YouTube, you will find us over there. And those videos there are free of charge, and you can tune in and actually watch. So if you're listening to this episode today, as the people on the video will see, I am presently wearing a Canucks jersey. And, playoff hockey in Canada is a big deal, even more so when your team is in it. And it's been 9 years since the Vancouver Canucks has been in the playoffs where where the fans were able to be in the stands. We had one during COVID, and it was a bubble playoffs, and it's kind of an asterisk beside it, right? And there was no fans in the building, even though I still remember them vividly. I'm rocking the jersey today because, I want to talk about what hockey has meant to me, and my identity as a Canadian, and also in my upbringing. I wouldn't be doing this work if it wasn't for this also shaping my own life. And and it's a big deal for me. I look back on my life, and there's so much that I want to share through this podcast, as a result of this desire and this passion. So, if you listen to my life story episode, I think that was episode number 2 or number 3. I was born in Alberta, and I still remember vividly when I first, one of my earliest memories, I think, is so the reason why I was born in Alberta was because my parents went to Bible school in the prairies, in Three Hills. There's a Bible school there called Prairie Bible College, and that was where my parents were going to school at the time, and then that's where they had me. As an international student, a Chinese international student going to a Bible college, there was no relatives in Three Hills for my parents, but there was one lady. Her name was Joan Chapman, and we call her Grandma Chapman. She was a caretaker of international students, particularly the Chinese ones, at the school. And she took care of us, took care of my family very, very well, and took care of my mom and dad while they were students there. And I remember when I was 3 years of age, she sent me a letter containing my first 2 hockey cards that I ever had, and it was one of each. One was of the Calgary Flames player, and another was of the Edmonton Oilers player, and both of those teams were the Alberta teams at the time. And man, I remember that memory so vividly because I fell in love with hockey at a very young age. Pretty much as soon as it was something that was almost like inalienable. Like I could not remove myself from loving the game of hockey. And another memory early on in my life before going to Venezuela, I recall, is one of my cousin. At the time, he was a few years older than I was, and I remember that he showed me, some of the star players on the Vancouver Canucks at the time, and he had a fridge with some of the players attached to it, like stuck on it. I remember Kirk McLean on there, Pavel Bure. There were those were the 2 that I really remember. Trevor Linden, right? I remember Trevor Linden was on there as well. Those big 3 back in the day. That was almost one of like the golden years of the Vancouver Canucks. It was one of the first Stanley Cup runs that they made. And I remember, like, and mind you, this was before I went to Venezuela, and so just as I was getting used to Canadian life and trying to understand what life in Canada was about and loving Vancouver, we went to Venezuela, and it was hard. It was very difficult for me, right? You understand my story, where I tell, is like I was very lost growing up because here I was as a Chinese Canadian born in Alberta trying to figure out my identity then to, and fall in love with Vancouver and Canada and hockey and that identity, suddenly to move to Venezuela, a foreign place with a foreign language, with different with different cultural backgrounds and different likes and different kinds of food. I had to. I was a Canadian now in a foreign place, and I had to get used to this new place, and yet I didn't want to let go of who I was as a Canadian. And so there's memories of me in church, setting up chairs, using a tennis racket as a hockey stick, and hitting a tennis ball as if I was playing hockey. And as a missionary back in those days, we were not very well off. In fact, we were quite poor. And not that God didn't provide for us, but I do remember we didn't live in any kind of abundance. And that was a part of me that when I grew up, there was a part of me that was very resentful of, because after 7 years in Venezuela, I was this dark chocolate skinned Chinese kid coming back to Canada, my home, and I felt I didn't know my home anymore. The kids that I went to school with they were all interested in things that I had no idea about. And I felt like I lost that side of me. And a lot of those friends were also, participating in hockey on a regular basis. They knew how to ice skate very well. I only knew how to rollerblade, and it wasn't really transferable. And even coming back, right, as after mission work, you don't instantly go into abundance. My dad was a pastor then, and it was hard to. I understand the difficulty. It was hard to provide for us all. There was 3 kids at that time, and like how do you provide for a family that way, and also allow your kids to enjoy something like hockey? It was not exactly the cheapest sport to get into. And so there wasn't that opportunity to open that door again. And so it left within me this very deep-seated kind of resentment for God. For like, why did you bring me to Venezuela? Like, I didn't want to go there. Like, why did you bring me there? Of course, I've reconciled those things, but there was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of resentment because as a child, you move around so much, you don't even know who you are, and then you got to go somewhere to figure out that, and that was very, very difficult for me. But I never lost that. I never lost that drive. I never lost that desire. I've always been a Vancouver Canucks fan. I think as long as I've known God and been on this planet, I've been a fan of the Vancouver Canucks. And so, if you wanted to say, as early as when I was 3 years of age, I've been a Vancouver Canucks fan for 35 years of my life, which is an astonishing amount of time to be a Canucks fan. And we've never won the cup, which is something that I've, thought about a lot. The last time we made a really deep cup run was the 2011 playoff run. And I still vividly remember where I was for every single one of those series clinchers. And then the inevitable loss in Game 7 to the Boston Bruins. It was man, my heart sank a lot. And I remember, I think I cried because it was heartbreaking. Not just heartbreaking in the fact that we lost the game, but it was almost as if I honestly felt like the league was against us. And Gary Bettman and his bunch of clowns didn't want Vancouver to win, because Boston was a bigger hockey market. And there were so much things about that time that I look back on. It was good memories, but at the same time, it was like we deserve so much better. And at the time, I've reconciled it, and it's crazy because I reconciled it in such a strange way. When we lost and the city started to burn, right? The riots started to take place. I was downtown at a friend's house watching the game, And I remember from his viewpoint, he overlooked the general area where all the fans were watching on the street. And I remember just black fumes of smoke, plumes of smoke, and how the city just started to destroy itself. I remember where I was. I remember how I felt. I remember I didn't get home till late that night. It was a crazy, absolutely crazy night. Um, and 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 I remember my thought at the time. A thought lurked into my head of like of not justifying. How do I say that? Of reconciling it, where putting a positive spin on it. I thought in my head, and I wasn't a dad. I wasn't a dad at the time yet, right? I wasn't even dating my wife yet. We weren't even a thing yet. And I remember in my head I said, well, they didn't win. Well, good. Then one day when I'm a dad, I may get to share this memory with my son or with my daughter. I said it. I said that in my head. I remember that, and it was a surreal thought. It was one in which, almost as if I was prophesying of sorts, like putting it out there. I was like, well, then God is. I get to share that with my son one day, and that was my positive spin on it. And now we're in the playoffs again, and my son is of the age where he is trying to learn new things, grasp new things. He has a desire to learn about the game, and it does form his identity as well. And my daughter as well. She was sitting with us yesterday, and we're watching it, and I get to, it's amazing because, like I've said before on this podcast, you watch a movie before you become a dad, and then you watch it after you become a dad, and suddenly new things hit you, new emotions hit you, and the gravity of an emotional situation just pulls on your heart in a different way. And that's really how I felt about it yesterday, as I was watching Game 1 versus Nashville Predators yesterday. Amazing! It was such a surreal experience, like getting to, we may not win the cup this year. I don't know, but to get to share that experience with my son. And at one point we came back for the third period because it was getting late and they needed to go to bed because they had school the next day. Him sitting on my lap, literally in this spot right here, watching this monitor, and we were watching the game together. It was a manifestation, I guess you say, a fruition of that thought of, I get to share this moment with my son and my daughter one day, and it came true. And so I'm excited for this year. You kind of come to life. You look forward to the games, and you and to give you a sense of how much I loved hockey, when I came back from Venezuela, every time there was a game and I had the opportunity to turn on the TV and tune into it, man, every time the Canucks scored, I would cheer as if it was Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals. You ask my mom and dad, they hated when the Vancouver Canucks games were on because I screamed so loud I'd wake up with a sore throat the next day cheering all the goals that went on. Cheer on the fights and cheer on good saves. And, I'm wearing the number 1, right? This is Roberto Luongo's jersey, and it was the 40th year, the 40th season when the Canucks made that 2011 run, right? So it says 2010 here, but actually, because the 2010 season goes into the 2011 year, that was the 40th season. This was the exact jersey I wore to those games, 2011, and was cheering them on. And I was very much I preferred the position of a goaltender. I loved Luongo. He was I still remember where I was when the Canucks traded for him, and how much I cheered jumping up and down I was living in California actually at the time, and cheering that we got Luongo. Like, it was such a big deal for me, and it's just, man, I got so many memories of it. And you think about 35 years of being a fan of this team. Um, it was I have like so many memories of the Vancouver Canucks. Um, so I'm very blessed. And I still remember, in games I used to pray for the players. I used to pray for the score, pray for a comeback. I would never, you know, sometimes it never happened. I never blamed God. But like that, that was how much it was a part of my identity. It was inalienable. My faith in God and my devotion and my fandom of my team. Even in my times of travel in China, not getting to watch the games there, trying to tune into the highlights as best as I could. Growing up as a kid, watching the stats and learning about all the players' names and remembering their numbers, to the point where remembering combination locks. I use the players' numbers to remember combination locks. Um, you know, and I just think in my head, instead of thinking of the numbers, I'm thinking about the players' names. And Vancouver Canucks makes a big part of who I am. And it's something that I've that makes up who I am in this podcast. And so, I don't know where this year is going to take us. And, I've said that this year was going to be an absolutely epic year. And the way the Canucks are playing, and they could win it all this year. And I mean, that would be an absolute like fruition of that dream of wanting to win the Stanley Cup and have my children with me as we do it. As you know, actually, you may not know, this year's retreat for Noble Father has been set in calendar, August 1st through the 5th. It's for our Fortress members being the members who are contributing members, who are paying the subscription to be a member on Noble Father. So far, we have about 8 dads coming together, and we're really just dadding our way through it. Our Noble Father meetups is one in which we, guys show up. Sometimes we have a prompt, sometimes we don't. The basic question when we don't have a prompt is, what do you need to get off your chest? What do you need to speak about today? And it's really just a space to share openly about life's problems, life's things, share about life. And, we dad our way through those conversations the same way we dad our way through our retreats. So in Orlando, we showed up, and like the first night, we're like, what do you want to eat? And somebody was like, hey, there's a gas station nearby called Wawa. Let's just hop in there and have a quick bite. And amazing. We had a blast. The whole trip was like not organized. There was no scheduled things. Hey, there's a rocket launch at 3 a.m. Let's go check it out. Boom. Went out and did it. And so this year we'll do that again here in Vancouver. The boys will get to come out and meet my family. We get to do things together. It's going to be an amazing year. And, if you are listening to this and you are thinking of contributing and helping something, please choose Noble Father. This is all I do for work. The podcast, the community, the meetups, the retreats. This is all I do for work. And these retreats are not money-making endeavors for me. I very much believe in helping fathers get together. So the value that they're getting for the monthly subscription that they're signing up for is astronomical, right? How much is your own growth worth to you, right? I know coaching programs out there that charge tens of thousands of dollars for this kind of group coaching accountability group, and yet we're offering this at $25 USD per month. And so there is really no comparison. And the amount of growth and the amount of results that the fathers have been getting, even though that is not the premise of the group, we are not a personal development group. Like, we are just a fathers group. It's just a dads helping dads kind of group, even though we're not that group, if you know what I mean. Noble Father is about serving the Father. And, though some might think that, hey, well, why are you making it why do you have to make it a premium group then? Because when fathers don't put skin in the game, it's not of value to them. And learning to invest in yourself and spending that money on yourself and prioritizing yourself is lesson number one in being the best father you can be. You cannot do that without investing in yourself. And so that little minimum barrier for fathers to get over is the minimum buy-in. And so, but that's not to say that, hey, you're not a father, but you want to contribute, that you can't do that. You can head on over to patreon.com/noblefather to contribute there. There are other tiers that you can get on that, subscribe at a bare minimum and contribute that way. I would very much like that. There are other ways to support that doesn't involve monetary funds. You can, share the podcast with fellow dads. You can share my posts on Facebook. You can share the group with other dads you think that would be interested. Everything you do can contribute. Also pray for me, right? Pray for me as a leader of the group. Pray for me, pray for the group, pray for the things that are happening as a community. Pray for this retreat because, this isn't a me thing. This isn't a I get the glory for it. This is a God thing. God brought this group together. God has great plans for us. And I pray as if God has already given us that. And so having more prayer warriors to support us on this journey is absolutely welcome. I definitely need it. And I can't do this journey on my own, and that includes prayer. And I wanted to close this episode off with a wonderful quote that I just stumbled upon, and I kind of tweaked it a little bit. I don't know where it came from, but I saw it, and I thought I'd add to it. And I want to leave you with this thought. Because it is something that makes up who we are, and it is our existence. We are here because God wants a relationship with us. The quote goes, "When life is not a bed of roses, remember who wore the crown of thorns and who he wore it for. When life is not a bed of roses, remember who wore the crown of thorns and who he wore it for." And if you don't know what that means, please reach out to me. I'd love to explain it to you. I'd love to tell you why that is so significant. Definitely appreciate you guys tuning into this episode. I'm going to keep it short this week. And yes, do go subscribe over to the YouTube channel there and to stay up to date with my uploads. And I want to thank you for joining me. Thank you for your support of this podcast. And remember, we're not promised tomorrow, so be present and stay noble. Go Canucks, go.